Before I get into the real meat and potatoes of what I wanted this video to be about, I do want to talk about TNA's Destination X, which was on this Thursday. Saw it. Basically, I thought it was a solid show. Thought I'd throw that out there at least. You know, say whatever you want about TNA, and Lord knows I've said plenty. And there's definitely a lot of negativity to throw around in their direction given their current situation and the lack of consistency with their product. But I thought Destination X was a solid show overall, and that Wolves Hardy Boys match was actually surprisingly really good. You never know what you're going to get out of the Hardy Boys these days, especially Matt, who, yeah, not in the best shape he's ever been in, but he looked good in this match, so it was good enough. And I thought it was just a really good tag match, so it was one of the better TNA matches I've seen in a while. So Destination X, not a bad show, not great, but not bad. I actually enjoyed it. But what I really wanted to talk about in this video were a couple of movie reviews. I did want to review a couple of movies. There were two that I've seen. One I saw tonight and one I saw last week. And I'll start with the one I saw last week. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which is a sequel to Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which was a reboot / prequel of the original classic film, Planet of the Apes, starring Charlton Heston. Now, I think I've said this before. I was never a huge fan of the Planet of the Apes franchise or anything. I liked the original just fine, but it was never a huge favorite of mine. I didn't really care for any of the sequels, and the Tim Burton movie that came out in 2001 pretty much killed my interest in any future attempts to redo Planet of the Apes. But then I saw Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I was like, wow, that was actually pretty good. I went into it with no expectations, and I came out of it fairly surprised. And this sequel, and again, I know I've mentioned this before, but I didn't even know it was coming out. I don't know, this one escaped my radar somehow, so when I heard it was coming out like a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh, well, fine, I'll go see that. I'll give it a chance. I like the last one, so why not? And this movie was so good. Holy shit, this movie was awesome. Really, again, I kind of went into it with these lowered expectations. Not low expectations, but I was pretty much thinking in the ring, like, oh yeah, I like the last one. I'll like this one too. And it really knocked my socks off at how good it was. And yeah, kudos to everyone that worked on this film, because it was pretty fucking good. And a lot of things I really liked about it. First of all, it's not an action movie. That's one thing I really did appreciate about it. It's not like this, you know, CGI fest, throw things up on the screen and go crazy for 2 hours. It's as far as action goes, there's really only 2 action sequences, and both of them, neither one is really that spectacular of an action set piece, but they perfectly serve the story. There's one in the middle, and then there's a one-on-one fight in the climax, and that's pretty much it as far as action goes. Everything else is this really tense, dramatic, emotional story about the oncoming conflict between the humans that are left following the outbreak of the virus and the apes and the society that they built, led by Caesar, who was the lead ape in the last film, played by Andy Serkis. And basically the entire movie is about the struggles of them trying to coexist and the disagreements that ultimately lead to a fight coming, which I'm not really giving away a spoiler by saying that. They do eventually fight, because the trailer pretty much shows that. But this entire movie is kind of like watching, you're kind of waiting for a time bomb to go off, because the relationship between the apes and the humans is so tense, and it's really like unnerving to watch the entire way through, because you just know shit's gonna go bad. And it's so dramatic. Every little thing that happens, and I'm not gonna spoil anything, but every little thing that happens kind of like tenses me up, because it's like you just know something bad's gonna happen. And also, I gotta praise him for not doing the story in the way I expected. I sort of expected the humans to pretty much do what they did the last time, where the humans are kind of the assholes and the apes are just kind of rebelling against that. And that's not exactly how it goes. There's good and bad on both sides. And and everybody's coming from a place that's understandable, and the conflict really does seem real, and it's a lot more complex outside of, here are the clear-cut good guys and here are the clear-cut bad guys. It's a little bit more multifaceted, a little bit more complex than something as simple as that. It's not just straight up black and white, and that makes for a pretty interesting viewing experience, and trying to gauge the arguments of every viewpoint that's expressed on both sides of the fence. And again, it makes for a great movie and just a really great experience. And the apes themselves are so well constructed, even better than the last movie. And it's not even a case of me really liking the CGI. The apes are so believable that I don't even realize that they're CGI characters. I just look at them and I just see living, breathing things. And I just accept the performance for what they are. And that's something I do want to talk about. When the fuck is Andy Serkis going to get an Oscar? I mean, this whole nonsense of, oh, well, he can't be nominated because it's a CGI character, and that's technically not a performance. I don't know what the Academy's mindset is, but it's bullshit, because it is Andy Serkis's performance. He's there physically on set doing this stuff. They're capturing his facial expressions to animate how the character is going to emote and act, and it's his voice doing it. So that to me is a performance, and it's totally Oscar-worthy. And there are scenes with Caesar and his family and his friends that are genuinely emotional and heartbreaking and completely believable, and it's mind-boggling to me that Andy Serkis won't even be considered for an Oscar for that type of a performance. It makes no sense to me. And actually, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Mike Myers, as the Cat in the Hat, in the eyes of the Academy, is technically more valid of a performance than anything Andy Serkis has done. Because that was a costume made with practical prosthetics and makeup, and it wasn't CGI. So technically, that performance is more valid, which, try and figure out the logic in that. It makes no sense. It really does remind me of Empire Strikes Back, and how I read stories about how George Lucas campaigned to get Frank Oz nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Yoda, and the Academy shot him down, saying, well, he's a puppet actor, he's a puppeteer, he's not an actor, that's not a performance, which, look at that character, look at Yoda in that movie, and tell me you don't buy that that's a living, breathing thing. Because the CGI Yoda in the prequels is nowhere near as believable as the puppet one from Empire and Return of the Jedi. And, when Yoda goes into that whole speech about the living force and the things all around you that make up the force and all that stuff, it's really a fantastic monologue. And I don't see a puppet when I look at that scene. I just see Yoda. When he dies in Return of the Jedi and he's, giving his last speech to Luke and, breathes his last breath, I don't see a puppet. I see a performance. It's a living character, and the fact that Frank Oz couldn't be nominated for that performance, especially in Empire, it makes no sense. And it's the same principle here, that it's just some silly rule that really doesn't make any sense. Because, as I said, the performance is all Andy Serkis. It's just they just paint over him, basically. The CGI is basically just his costume, because everything else is all him, and the fact that he can't be nominated for an award based on his performance in these movies is just insane. And I'll go this far. Andy Serkis as Caesar, especially in this movie, is better than Gollum. I know that's a heavy boast, but it was just such an emotional performance, both with the physical aspect of it and the way it communicated and emoted and presented itself. It was just a wonderful character, and most of the apes were. They were very believable, and I just got to shrug my shoulders and go, oh well. But the apes were just really well done in this movie, and I just love the way they were constructed, and it was so easy to get sucked into their society and their world, and just take everything that they do as being 100% believable. And there are some images in this movie that, if I describe them to you, they sound completely absurd, like the apes riding on horses, or an ape on a horse with two machine guns riding into battle with both guns blaring. It sounds completely absurd, but the apes themselves are so believable as characters that you just kind of buy it. You don't even snicker at it. At least I didn't. You just buy it as a legitimate thing, and that's pretty remarkable that they were able to pull that off. And I love the way they communicate with each other. And actually, in the movie, they communicate through their own sign language, and they subtitle it for us through most of the movie. Part of me wishes that they'd been able to convey their conversations without subtitles, and see if they could get the audiences to figure out what they're saying just with visuals and not with any kind of subtitles. But that's just me being kind of artsy-fartsy. But yeah, the apes themselves are just phenomenal in this movie, and just really, really well done, and just great performance. Everyone that played an ape in this movie did a fantastic job, and the CG, like I said, the CGI is so flawlessly good that I don't even realize it's CGI. It's just, and it's, you know, again, to credit George Lucas, it's weird to throw praise at George Lucas these days, but I remember hearing a story on Willow. Ron Howard told this story. It was in a documentary or something, and there was a visual effect they needed to achieve for that movie where it was like a transformation effect. And Ron Howard said something like, man, I hope audiences are amazed by this. Like, we want to create this image that just makes them go ooh and ah, and just amaze them with it. And George Lucas told him, it's like, well, they don't have to be amazed by it, they just have to believe it. And that's kind of what this movie is. It's like, I'm not necessarily amazed with the effects or amazed with the visuals of what they're presenting on screen. I just accept it as real. And it just feels so natural and organic. And they did a fantastic job bringing these creatures to life, and it makes for a really nice, dramatic, emotional movie. And actually, except for one scene with Gary Oldman, I almost said Gary Coleman, but Gary Oldman, where he breaks down and has a really big emotional moment. And not that the human actors are bad, but I think the apes upstage the humans in a lot of ways. As being more believable characters. Not that they're bad, and not that the humans are bad. I'm just saying that the apes were just so well done that it's really remarkable. And I'm trying to think of things that I didn't like about this movie, and there wasn't much. The only things I can think of is that there are a couple of things in the story that are not plot holes, but plot conveniences. Like, a 1 in a million chance thing happens. Like, okay, two characters meet at one point in the movie, and it's convenient for moving the story forward that they do, but the chances of them meeting up together are like 1 in a million. It's just, oh, what convenient timing that they just happen to be in this spot just so they can get to this point and keep the story moving. But that kind of stuff kind of happens in every movie, so I can just kind of let it slide. But Dawn of the Planet of the Apes was pretty damn good, and really, again, caught me by surprise. And this coming from a person that was not a huge... Again, I like the original, but I'm not a huge diehard Planet of the Apes fan. I might be now after watching this movie. I really did enjoy this, and it was just fantastic film. Just absolutely wonderful. And if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. I thought it was great. One of the better movies I've seen this year, quite honestly. And another movie I saw, I just got back from seeing it, Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, this movie's a lot of fun. I'm going to say that. I won't say it's the best Marvel movie, because I still really like Captain America 2 and the Avengers and the first Iron Man and stuff like that. But what I will say is that it's definitely the funniest. This movie is hilarious. And really, it's exactly what I wanted out of this film. It's a wonderful throwback science fiction adventure film. It reminds me of like the Star Wars trilogy, or even cheesier ones like Flash Gordon. I love that movie, Flash Gordon. If you haven't seen Flash Gordon, go check it out. It's amazing. And it really kind of felt like a throwback to those type of sci-fi epics, and I just loved it from start to finish. And like I said, it's fun, it's energetic, the cast is fantastic. Batista is actually really good in this. I'm not kidding. He's actually funny, and he delivers his lines well enough, at least better than I would have expected from him. And I kind of look at his recent run in the WWE, and then I look at this movie, and I'm like, well, what the hell went wrong? Because he was terrible this year in the WWE, but in Guardians, he's pretty good. And, what's his name? Chris Pratt, he's just a marvel. I love him in Parks and Recreation, and he was great in the Lego movie, so it's no surprise that he was entertaining here as well. And Zoe Saldana's really good. Who else is in there? Michael Rooker. who played Merle on The Walking Dead and who was also the evil dad in Mallrats. He's a great, wonderful character actor, and I love watching him whenever he's on. He has a part in this, and he's great. The real stars of the show, though, are Groot and Rocket Raccoon, especially Rocket Raccoon. I love that little guy. And if I didn't love that character before, just from reading the comics and stuff, if I didn't love him before, I love him even more now, because the voice that Bradley Cooper gave him and just the lines he gets and the delivery and everything, he's fantastic, and he totally steals the show, for me anyway. And Groot's adorable. He kind of reminds me of Ludo from Labyrinth. And he's just this big lovable lug, and he's great as well. So just great action set pieces, a lot of fun, very exciting. Doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's a movie that allows itself to be goofy, and because of that, it's just a fun ride all throughout. And whenever they do goofy, like really, really goofy things, it fits. It doesn't feel like it's betraying the movie or anything like that. Everything that they do feels like it completely fits. And the movie never loses sight of its over-the-top absurdity and its just over-the-top fun action-adventure. And it's really, really great. And the dialogue and the interactions of the characters, it's all just really funny and really well done. And although to the film's credit, there are also these small character moments where they give them a little bit more depth, where it's a little heavier. And actually the movie starts off kind of heavy before getting into the sillier side of things. And it does make the movie feel like it has more emotional weight than it might seem like it does on the surface with all the craziness going on. But, there's this scene, actually, where the Guardians are all sitting around talking about what they're going to do and what their plan's going to be. It is the funniest scene in the movie, and it is also the most emotionally satisfying scene in the movie. So it's just a wonderful scene where the characters bounce off of each other, tell jokes, and have one-liners, and then have serious moments and a big speech and all of that stuff. It's just a wonderful, well-acted scene with all these great characters. And I mean, I can't say enough about this movie. The action itself is great. The jokes are great. The action's great. The characters are great. There's really not a whole lot of bad things I can say about it. It's just it's a wonderfully enjoyable film, and I can't picture too many people not liking it. It's just so much fun and so exciting. And again, compared to the other Marvel movies, I think Captain America 2 is more my cup of tea, and maybe I like the Avengers more, and maybe I liked Iron Man 1 more, but Guardians is pretty high up there, I think, and it's pretty damn good, and I really like it. And even the villain, who I thought was going to be kind of because one of my problems with Thor 2, even though I did like Thor 2, one of my problems with it is that the villain was really lame, like really weak sauce, and he was just there to be the bad guy, and he was just like, oh, I'm big and scary, and I'm the big, mean, scary guy. But the villain this time around is genuinely menacing, and even though he just kind of skirted in that territory where it's like, grr, I'm just the bad guy, and I wear black, and blah, 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 he's, like I said, he's more believably menacing, and he's more badass, and he's more, more fun to watch, I guess, and he's also used to set up things for the future, and he's woven into the story into a very interesting way, because it turns out he's a bit player in a much larger story that's being constructed. So so I was fine with the villain as well, and pretty much just about everything worked in this movie. It's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend that you go see it. It's a blast. Now, one last comment I do want to make. The post-credit scene, which anybody who's watched Marvel movies know that they have post-credit scenes up the wazoo, but the post-credit scene in this movie, I won't spoil it, but Marvel is getting cocky. That's all I'm going to say. Marvel is really getting an ego now. The things that they're really, either that or they're just really, really daring. I'm not sure which, but it was a nice little surprise there in the end credits. So, stay tuned for that and continue watching. But, that's all I've got. Just two really good movies out there that I highly recommend. If you want a more serious movie, go see Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. You won't regret it. It's great. You want to have awesome, over-the-top, funny, exciting fun? Go see Guardians of the Galaxy. You'll love that. And hey, you know, if you're like me and you like all different types of movies, go watch both. They're both fantastic. Neither one is a waste of money, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's two great movies, and I loved them both, and I highly recommend them. But until then, yeah, I think I'm pretty much done here, so I will have a video out sometime next week. Probably, my next one's probably going to be the question and answers video. So, yeah, I got to start filming that. But, yeah, that's all I've got for now, so you all enjoy your weekend, and I will see you all later.